Kismet is a magical moment that just happens out of happenstance, and it's when wonderful things happen. So I think that that's a perfect description of something that was meant to be, that was not necessarily, planned as such at the onset. Another takeaway is all good business happens at a coffee shop.
The water's fine, homie, jump into the deep end. Sow it, you will reap it. We talking how to start it, how to grow it, how to keep it. Take a deep breath. You are now rocking with Founder Secret.
Zoya Lehrer, welcome to Founder Secrets.
Thank you so much for having me.
So as your last name, Lehrer, means teacher.
Yes, it does.
German, right?
It does. I was in Germany last summer, and I've never felt more at home with that last name. I was very well received. Yes.
That's awesome. And so you're the co-founder of Orgo, which we'll talk about. And you just have the best video background of anyone we've had on the pod. So wonderful French painting on the left, but then an amazing collection of champagne on the
suspended in free air. Yes, just suspended on a wire and glass shelves. So it's very
Is that Dom Perignon? What is that?
No, it's like an Italian, prosecco. So it was just the bottles are pretty. We're not fancy.
I don't know. It looks pretty fancy, but it's very, very nice to have you on. And so, all right, well, you'll kick off with a little icebreaker, which is how did you meet your co-founder and decide to start together? We'll all go around. You want to go first?
Sure, I'll go first. I'll kick it off. I've got two co-founders. So we're a three-legged stool, which I think for us was really appropriate. We're designing a B2C experience, at least to start. And so we felt that a UX and product designer was a really integral part of our success in doing so. And of course, the other one is more on the technical side, is our CTO. I started reaching out to then who became the CTO first, is somebody that I've worked with in the past, that I've trusted and kind of knew was a sound technical mind. And so when we kind of get into the idea of what Orgo really has ultimately become to be, it was just an idea to start. So we sat down over coffee for 2 hours, shared the idea with him, wanted to get some kind of technical expertise and guidance. And then after 2 hours of just becoming impassioned by the problem statement and wanting to become part of the solution, we just kind of decided to do it together. So it was very organic, very much Kismet type of, moment situation. And so we went off from there.
So let me just understand, you cold reached out to these people, and is that how you met them?
So one was a cold outreach to someone that I have worked with previously that I had not spoken to in several years. It was one of those where, hey, haven't seen you in a while, haven't caught up. I know that you're in the area. Let's grab a cup of coffee. I've got this idea I'm kicking around. Would love your expertise and opinion on, how I should think about going at it, to approach it. We sat down, and it was not an ask per se. It was just a really organic conversation of just, sharing the problem statement, ideating on what a potential solution could look like, acknowledging the fact that it is technically complex, yet with, a lot of implication for user experience and simplicity and so forth. And we just became mutually impassioned by wanting to kind of work on it together. And then he said that he was all in. So coming out of the 2-hour coffee conversation, I had a co-founder, which was not the ask going in. It was more about, hey, let me kind of use you as a sounding board. And then it just was one of those Kismet moments that wound up being a relationship. And then I reached out to somebody from my past yet again, who was a UX and product designer. And so that was the official ask to say, now we've got a thing that we're starting to kind of work on and think about, would you come on board and consider doing it alongside with us? So it was very organic and very kind of off the cuff, to be honest. So off we went from there. And this was last April.
What's a Kismet moment?
I've never heard that.
It's when it's the universe that just wills itself. That's okay. English is not my first language too. So it's a
well, it is Taylor's first language. It's not mine.
Taylor, you go. You describe it. You explain it.
Well, I don't know. I've never heard it.
All right. We're all learning something today. Kismet is a magical moment that just happens out of happenstance, and it's when wonderful things happen. So I think that that's a perfect description of something that was meant to be, that was not necessarily, planned as such at the onset.
Awesome. All right, Taylor, you want to go?
Yeah. So in how I met, so I have two co-founders as well. And after I sold my last business, one of my former clients reached out and said, hey, my neighbor just sold his business. You should meet him. And I'm like, okay, what kind of business was it? Like, why would I meet him? And so I just said, sure. And that was kind of it. And then like a week later, I get an email intro to this person I don't know. And he, from his perspective, it's the same way. He got the same conversation. Hey, you should meet, So we went to coffee. I think neither of us expected anything. And Kismet, it worked out. So yeah, but really we just went to coffee. We talked for an hour and a half. I thought he was an interesting guy. But that was it. And then we didn't talk for 6 months or 9 months after that. And then he emailed me one day and he said, hey man, I enjoyed our coffee, several months back. What are you working on? I'm looking at what's next. What are you working on? And the day before that, someone had just told me that this prototype that I was working on, it was Toyota, who ended up becoming our first client in this business. And they were a client in my last business, but they said, we'd be interested. So Keith happened to email me right at the moment that this person had said, yeah, so that was the kind of fate part of it. Because had he emailed me a week prior, I probably would have been like, just kind of kicking things around. Like it wouldn't have worked out. But he emailed at just the right moment. And then we got our other co-founder, Hans, through our lead investor and chairman of our board. And he said, hey, you guys need a CTO. And I know someone. And so it all very fortuitous. Very happy with how it worked out. But even hearing your story, it's making me think, I guess it was rather fateful. It was, all kind of lined up. What about you, Flavio?
Yeah, so the Kismet moment for us was that I was organizing the Python
The unofficial title of this podcast is The Kismet Moment.
The Kismet Moment. I like it.
I thought it was like Kismet.
Is it Kismet or Kismet? It's Kismet, right?
Kismet. You just got to swallow a bunch of syllables and just spit it out. Kismet. Yes.
Kismet.
So this Python meetup I was organizing, nobody would come. This was before Python became popular. And this guy showed up. It was in a coffee shop because the place we were going to meet at got canceled because their air conditioning wasn't working. And in North Carolina in the summer, if your air conditioning is not working, it's a hazard. It's a life-threatening situation. So I just sent a message, hey guys, for all of you coming to this meetup, which is like nobody. We moved it to a coffee shop. So I was just there working by myself at the coffee shop. And then this guy comes in and is like, and this is a big coffee shop. Like, there's a lot of people. And he just walks up to me. He's like, hey, is this the Python meetup? And I'm like, yeah, it is. And he's like, oh, great, because I have this Python project I'm working on to like scan all the legislative actions happening in Washington and put them on a website. And I was like, wow, this guy is just like really interested in Python. And and I asked him, like, well, what's his story? And he's like, oh, I'm a pharmacist. I'm in pharmacy school, and I just do Python on the side to do these projects that I like to do. And it just like blew my mind. And I got really excited because I've never met a pharmacist before, and certainly not one that would program Python. And he was really interested in learning Python, so we kind of exchanged ideas. And yeah, just after hacking together for a while, we're like, hey, we should start a company together. And the rest is history.
Another takeaway is all good business happens at a coffy shop.
That's true. All three
common
stories.
Common thread here on the survey.
That's true.
Yeah. It's the modern day golf course, I would argue.
It really is.
It's actually more expensive than a golf course now, but definitely worth going. So tell us the story of how you came to found Orgo. What's the inspiration? What made it?
Well, after the coffee shop or before the coffee shop meeting.
Yes, let's just kind of keep talking from there. We're on this timeline last April, right? So coming out of that coffee shop, I think what was most important is the fact that not only did we agree and we were equally as impassioned by the what, but more so we were aligned on the how. And so this is where I think many co-founder stories can get interesting, can evolve to become success versus perhaps not, is the pivotal point of like, how are we actually going to do it? So we happen to be super aligned on the how, which for us was bootstrapping. So a couple of things that really contributed to our ability to do so, and also us taking making the decision to take that on is that he himself personally, because again, this is a tech solution with a digital, footprint that is the product, or for the foreseeable future it would be, he was willing to code and begin coding himself. So getting ourselves up off the ground and making sure that we had a team of doers, which we're now 6 large, but initially we started with just the original 3. That was critical. And so the question was not necessarily is the one that you asked, but I just wanted to call that out. So the timeline only continued because we were committed and willing to kind of start to roll up our own sleeves and do the work on our own, at that early onset. But how that idea even came to be was I spent 20 years in financial services and banking and insurance, always within a tech capacity within my own career. Lived in the New York, New Jersey area, which means that we're always working for some big bank. And so that's kind of where my career was mostly focused in. And so there's a lot of M&A, integrations, a couple of divestitures, even an IPO. And so that was kind of founding experience for me. That was just so incredibly important to kind of have, under my belt. But in that world, where I did work for large enterprises, I felt super productive in that day-to-day. The days were busy and long, but there was never a question of how I was going to go about my day, what I was looking to achieve. The tools were there to help me. Productivity tools, obviously the office suites, all of the collaboration, organizational tools and so forth. That was just part of the day-to-day. In direct contrast to my professional life was my personal. And so through the years, we now have 3 daughters. I've got 13, 9, and 6. Flavia, I know you just shared a little bit about yours, and you can kind of jump in with your own kid stack in just a minute when it's appropriate. But 13, 9, and 6 is where we sit now. And so through the years of life just getting much more complex, on the home front, there was just this observation that I kept making continually throughout, in that super productive at work, super in control of my day, not so much, and eventually not at all, as the years had gone by and our lives had become more complex on the personal front. So that just made me think, why is there such a technical chasm that exists between the professional realm and our personal lives? The answer is probably pretty simple, because B2B is profitable, B2C is not. But there's a lot of precedent for how we should feel in terms of productivity within our lives generally overall, and there's a lot to be borrowed from our professional space, into the personal. And so that was kind of the original aha moment, is to say, firstly, why is this the case? Why am I feeling this level of disparity kind of between the two worlds? I'm one individual, I've got common goals. And then I started to kind of dig in. So through the years, started to keep a list, really. And the list really started to tie back to the fact that my life kept getting more logistically complex. And I'm going to start to use that word very intentionally throughout. As the household became more complex, it wasn't a matter that I was super bogged down by, chores or groceries or anything like that. We kind of managed through that as anyone would. But as the kids kept getting older, it was about logistics. I'm raising 3 daughters I mentioned who happen to be athletes. So we do all the travel sports, we do all the teams and all of the kind of runaround, which ultimately takes me out of my home. And so we'll get into how, Orgo is different in that regard, but ultimately living through that life through the years, increased complexity, and really kind of feeling this white space that exists within the tech, arena within, our households around logistics is where Orgo was kind of born out of. Organization on the go is the derivative of the name itself. So a little bit of a backdrop there.
Keep going. So so you've been thinking about this idea, and then keep going from there.
Yeah, so for sure. So doubling down on logistics. And so what's kind of about it that's super different and unique, rather than, all the other tools that we've got, within our lives today. So interestingly, really kind of breaking down what is the problem. Our calendars within our personal lives, call it our Apple or Google, so not naming them by, name per se, but just in general as a construct, is what we rely upon as the most digitally savvy families or even individuals that we are within our personal lives. Those tools, by and large, were made for the enterprise to start. And then over time had transitioned into our phones and into our day-to-day lives as they live today. And so what's interesting about that, for the most part, it works. And it's why it works within our professional lives, because you and I are just sitting here, at the computer, and we're just dialing in, we're going back-to-back calls, and we're just kind of dropping into places, and we're switchboarding all day. That is fine and is very much appropriate. In life, that's not how it happens. That is not how we manage time. That's not how we travel through space and time. The second that we leave the house, which is the very definition of logistics, getting the right people to the right places on time, is where our digital calendars break down. That's just not what they're built for. That's not the intent. That is not the utility that they serve. And so that's kind of the basic most value proposition that we will start to introduce into market, very soon with Orgo, is that we're redefining and reimagining what a digital calendar ultimately could look like within the realm of logistics. And it is within the context of families to start. And I'm very intentional about that because it is a strong founder kind of problem fit as a result of my own observations and living, kind of through this challenge myself personally. But that's not where the value proposition ends per se. We think that it's more of a human issue than it is, a family one to start. But that's a very specific target user group that we're going to be going after to help busy families like my own get through the day.
Well, I still don't understand. So how is it better than Google Calendar?
So the way that we're thinking about logistics specifically is the fact that you have to take into effect things that are travel time, preparation time, return trip, and so forth. Those is what's actually called forgotten or lost time. There's an actual concept for it. It's kind of inherently implied. So when you have a calendar entry, and I'll give you a perfect example of a use case stemming from my own personal life. We go to swim meets, we go to soccer games, just perfect stalker mom kind of example there. I've got a game that's on my calendar that says 12-1. And, normally when it drops into the calendar as such, and it just lives on as that placeholder, that's good and well, until it's actually time to execute on that commitment that is currently labeled as 12-1. So let me tell you how I back into 12-1 and how my calendar is not helping me do so. 12-1 usually means if a game starts at 12, the coach is going to ask you to arrive at least 30 minutes earlier for warm up. That's just a given. The coach will also ask for you to bring the blue or the purple uniform, whatever it may be. They will provide an address, which most likely is some cockamamie field 45 minutes away that you won't know is 45 minutes away because you've got to copy and paste that address and look it up and then start to kind of do the T-minus computation in your mind. 15 minutes even prior to that, I'm going to start yelling at my kids to get their shit together. And so that's kind of where the beginning of that particular event kicks off. On the back end of that, there's another 45-minute drive, not shown or told or programmed anywhere, that also has to occur. So end to end, if we kind of do the math right, it's about 3 hours worth of a commitment, a little less, that is not depicted or shown anywhere. It just exists in my mind. And so we as parents, we as individuals, some of us head of households, head of family logistics and so forth, begin to store that information locally and manually. And that's an incredibly manually intensive exercise every single day, every single weekend. Factor that times 3 by my busy kids. Where are the conflicts? Where are the overlaps? Where are the anticipated moments where we can do carpool and start to kind of negotiate all the ways that we can arrive to these places and ultimately just execute on the very commitment of showing up 12-1 for this game that lives on my calendar and is not at all helpful in terms of how I lead my life. So that's just one small example amplified by many others like it.
I don't understand still how, so Orgo, let me try to rephrase. So Orgo takes into account all these other little things around the event based on, I guess, emails and metadata from your life, and then still puts the event on a calendar, just makes it 11-2 instead of 12-1. Is that fair to say, or help me better rephrase that, what it actually
Sure. So in exactly what I've just described, we're going to open up what I keep calling like the accordion of time. So instead of the book being closed on 12-1 and kind of not indicating all the things that surround it, let's open it up to, yes, in fact, recognize that all those other time segments exist. So we are ultimately redefining what that event looks like in full expansion. Within it, there are roles that we've implemented inside the event itself that include drivers, which is a very meaningful level of detail and a dimension that is managed completely externally in text threads, in email chains, in WhatsApp groups that parents are coordinating amongst themselves. That is manual information. People literally store this in spreadsheets. I kid you not. It is so complicated because the permutations of what today looks like versus what tomorrow might is never the same, and it's ever changing. So staying on top of that information is really important for us to kind of capture inherently within the event itself. And when all of that comes together, remember, this is just like our beta that's being launched with a very basic value proposition that starts this conversation. complexity needs to be built on top of it, and we certainly will. But what happens even at this very basic level is if we program all of this metadata, we start to generate notifications. The notifications is kind of like the cherry on top that begin to then guide you through a successful execution of this expanded event, step by step by step. And these steps matter. These individual details that dictate what then happens next allows you to execute, yes, successfully on the full end-to-end event itself, but also be more present. Like, I'm having a conversation with you right now. My phone's going to go off in 15, 20 minutes because there's an event that's about to start that will indicate that it's time for me to start to prepare. I got to start yelling at that kid, or better yet, that kid's going to receive the exact same notification that they got to get their shit together. So now I'm out of that equation most immediately as the one that's got to kind of dictate what's next and what's coming up. And now we're all involved and we're all kind of on the same page. Secondly, an extension of that is the ecosystem amongst the users themselves. So this is designed for a crew concept. If you come in, Taylor, as a single user, you're probably not going to get a whole ton of value for it. But if you bring in your crew, in the case of a family, it's your kids themselves, it's your sitter, your nanny, your spouse, your mother-in-law, anybody who's kind of in your village that's assisting you with the execution of the day. And believe me, it does take a village when you kind of get into that age group, then everybody starts to be on the same page. I will tell you that I write novels for my mom in terms of text message translations of what each day entails, step-by-step instructions that is such tremendous overhead that, again, falls on the part of at least one family member to kind of keep this thing running and together. So now that level of clarity, that inherent communication starts to become a lot more kind of, intrinsic in the experience itself.
So in this scenario, does it replace like the calendar in a way? Does it supplement, like, would I use Google Calendar or what have you for my work things? And then once I switch, to your point, like once I leave the office, once I leave that mindset, are they separate, or do you also incorporate work items into this kind of workflow?
It's a wonderful question. And when we ran our beta back in October of last year, we had the de facto MVP group. It was a cohort of friends and family that we ran this experience through, of about 40 users for a period of a month. That's a natural question that was raised, and we frankly anticipated it, right? So I hate the fact that we're even entering the realm of calendaring, because the digital calendar is literally public enemy number one. And so we've all kind of grown to love and hate and live with it. So here we are trying to introduce yet another one, but it's a natural question to say, what else then happens to all the other stuff that I have living everywhere else? The answer real time, like most immediately, is we have already bifurcated our lives. Call it good, bad, or indifferent. It's just kind of what's happening today, that we already have accepted the fact that there's a work calendar that's happening somewhere else, whether it's governed by Outlook or it's got firewalls that we just kind of get into or out of, frankly. And then we've got our personal calendar. So to start, I'd like to address the personal first within the context of, if logistics is where you live, and this is a problem that you experience, try us in that particular realm. Thereafter, product market fit, all those wonderful things, from like a true business perspective aside, the customer end experience that is the holy grail is that there should be a world in which we now have this symbiotic, right? This integrated state where I'm a single human. I'm able to execute through my day, whether I'm kind of traversing through the portions of the day that's my work-related schedule, and then there's others that I've got within my personal life. So yes, we would love to continue kind of going down the similar path and merge the two eventually in some meaningful way. But out the gate to start, I'd love to kind of address the personal space within which, if logistics is something that is a focal point in someone's day-to-day life, we'd love to improve that at least marginally to start.
Okay, so can I want to repeat back what I think I heard. So today, if somebody has on the calendar 12 to 1 swim meet, yes, then in your ideal, and if I'm a customer, then I instead see, this swim meet is going to take from 10:30 to 1 or whatever it is, and there's 45-minute drive on either side, and there's prep time at the beginning, and it's and it's my daughter Sarah, and my mother-in-law's driving, and it's all this metadata around the event itself, that maybe still shows on my work calendar as 12 to 1 or as 10 to 2 or whatever it is, but it's just a lot more the logistics of how to actually make it happen.
It's decorated, it's expanded, right? That metadata is functioning as indicators of who is doing what for whom, where, and what time, and in what sequence. And when that's done at scale, and when you live through that, I mean, I tell you guys, if I show you my calendar of what it looks like on a weekend, like your eyes will roll to the back of your head. This level of detail is meaningful. This level of precision is necessary. And it's happening already. So it's not like I'm coming in to say, hey, you should do these things, or how about you try thinking about, space time in this way. It's happening anyway. So what the observation originally, back to the point of, kind of the origin story of this observation was, well, why isn't it? Well, why can't technology better help me and show me the things that are kind of kept manually in my head? We're doing that elsewhere through other solutions. This is happening every single day. And there's millions of families, there's 60 million kids in the US alone are doing sports and extracurricular activities just within this one use case alone. So it's happening at scale, and it's a generation of the overscheduled kids, the ones that, our latchkey generation is gone. Now they're kind of super scheduled, and everybody's doing all these wonderful things that have measured benefits. But as a result of that, us parents, we're doing this crazy runaround. It's really on us to deliver this level of execution. It's a lot. It's really stressful.
Is there anyone competing in this space right now? Is there? It sounds, now that I understand it, I don't have kids, so now that I understand it, I'm like, oh yeah, this makes a lot of sense to me. Is there someone competing in this space right now?
Yeah, I love that question so much, because I too myself have come in as a complete newcomer, into not only the founder entrepreneurial ecosystem, but into the industry, what is actually formerly called as FamTech. So I came from fintech, and now this is FamTech. And it's all about, aiming at solutions specifically around, the parents, the household, and so forth. And because we've chosen to double down on this use case surrounding parents, and in this particular example, youth sports and so forth, we naturally live as an extension and a part of that ecosystem. I'm actually going to a meetup tomorrow with a FamTech group. So it's kind of like, yeah, it's absolutely does exist. So within that realm, by my research, observation, not only as a user personally seeking solutions initially, right? Like I didn't wake up one morning on a Tuesday being like, hey, you know what we should do? We should do this startup called Orgo. That's just going to go ahead and like double down on logistics for families. I did market research, and I went out and looked for solutions that would serve as an extension of that for my own use case. And what I found was that the majority of the solutions out there today are very much focused on the inside of the household. It's a lot of the chore management. It's making sure that the household is running smoothly. And yes, there's a lot of similar issues that kind of exist, whether it's communication, whether it's making sure that everybody's roles are super clear. And then there's groceries and recipes and all these things that kind of happen naturally in life. But for us, the differentiating factor, and again, stemming back to my very own pain point, is what happens when you leave that house. Logistics kick in. There's something else that we need. We're do something differently and uniquely to what it is that exists within the home itself. So that's kind of how we're thinking about it. Wonderful solutions aimed for the inside of the home. We're kind of worrying about everything that happens once you leave it.
This is awesome. I mean, I think what I'm wondering though, you seem like a very organized person. You seem like you have logistics under control, or at least you think about it a lot and you have a lot of solutions for it. I, on the other hand, for example, do not have that skill or desire or honestly, I think I like things being unplanned and being more surprised and in the moment. And I realize this is an effective life strategy, but it is how some people, and I don't think I'm the only one on the planet. So I think this is how some people are. So I'm wondering, like, what about people like me, right? Like, because I'm not going to be feeding it this metadata about all these things. It might take 45 minutes. Whatever. I'll just be 15 minutes late. I'm not gonna feed all this stuff. So how would your solution work with slots or people like me?
Yeah, no, I love that so much, because I think it does challenge the human factor, right? Like, again, we've been talking so much about families, and we don't have to be super literal. It's to say you must have a family in order to appreciate this problem. I do think it's more of a personality and a brain trait that says, I like precision. I like to be at places on time. I appreciate predictiveness of kind of knowing what my day is going to look like. I probably have ADHD, to be honest with you, because that is something that drives kind of my mental state and how healthy I feel and successful I feel in my day when I do have some of that predictability. So I think that that's probably the most important factor, nor am I here to tell you and convince you that you should be of that same brain length, right? That's just not kind of how we operate. But I will say that as a parent, which I know you now are, of soon to be 2 kids, and congratulations to you on that, that may change. And so this, I too was a freeform spirit at one point, and I love to float through space and time. The nature of my life and the one that I lead today is one where I just don't have the luxury, frankly, of that. And so I am driven by everyone else's commitments and my needing to plug into those in order to just make it happen. So it may be a case of personality, brain, powers and so forth, but then it's always circumstances too. So maybe if those circumstances change, you may think about time differently, but until then, please float, live, love.
Well, and maybe Flavia, like you're not the personality type that, buys it, that you're not the target customer or,
sure.
Cause
well, I guess I'm pushing back on how much input does it need, right? Does it just automatically take all my texts and emails and like magically figures all this stuff out, or do I have to input the data? Because if I have to input data, I can tell you right now, I'm not going to do it.
I totally feel you, because again, this is why we did our alpha, right? Because we kind of already knew that this was going to be a potential barrier to entry, or some of the additional features that we're going to continue to develop on and kind of improve upon over time. So what is not available for beta coming out imminently within literally days, because we're waiting up extra approval, that beta will not have the automated or the semi-automated capabilities of the input. So we know that for a fact. We will speak to that very explicitly. We own that. That's a decision. There was a different point in which we said, okay, well, should we just kind of import all the data that already lives in my existing calendars? And then that's kind of the initial start. And then we start to decorate those events. That was a horrible experience. We started to go down that designing rabbit hole, and the data conversion aspect to all of this, which effectively would be implied, was just prohibitive within itself. So we're kind of saying, hey, give us a try putting it in. It's very, very quick, manually to start, and just get the output. Start feeling the value of what it is to be guided at this kind of level of detail and precision. That's what's most important. How I then will back you into that and automate that in the future, that's kind of the next solve. So that's essentially what we're going to be looking to measure in terms of, KPI and the level of success for this beta to start. Now, alongside that, we're developing Orgo GPT. So this is a closed, model that we will continue to train within the context of the experience itself. That's going to be speech to text. So you're going to be like, hey, I've got, again, soccer game, whatever it is, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, I've got practice at here this time. I've got this location, this other time, and so forth. And so complexity starts to be overlaid, and that learning continues to expand. Thereafter, we've got much bigger plans from like a, B2B perspective, perhaps some SaaS plays and so forth from like a scaling standpoint. So that is a much later, value proposition that we'll continue to explore. But this initial entry point is something that we're well prepared for.
I really love people who build products that fit their life, or things that, hey, I had this problem. That's how I built Signal Insights. Like, I wanted this. I went and looked for it. I couldn't find it. So I guess I'll just build it. You mentioned, switching gears a little bit, you mentioned on LinkedIn kind of making tough decisions, trade-offs, sacrifices in the entrepreneurial journey. Can you speak to one of those difficulties, or speak to kind of a difficult decision that you had to make, and how you feel about it now?
Well, first of all, I miss my banker salary. So let's start there. The decision to bootstrap is one that's directly proportional to what that means, kind of signing up for it, right? Like, we've not taken in any institutional funding. We've not taken any external funds, which means that, yes, it's sweat equity and we're doing the work, but at what cost? For me personally, the rest of my team is moonlighting. I have chosen to give this, a full go, serve as the voice and de facto face of this mission and the effort that's kind of obviously on behalf of the team itself. So honestly, that's been the hardest part because I've always led from behind, and I've led large teams throughout my, my career. And I really enjoy the people management aspect of it. I really love kind of feeling the cohesion of a team. And right now, yes, we are a team behind the scenes, but I appear in public as a team of one. And I dislike that feeling. I don't love kind of that aspect of it. So as a direct extension of knowing that that's what I effectively would be stepping into, it was a matter of finding my own voice, because always being an extension of someone else's voice within corporate or other missions or projects and initiatives and so forth, it was a lot easier to kind of get up on a panel and start talking about what it is that we're doing that someone else is mandating for us to do. Now it's self-driven. Flavio, I love your questions. They're all decisions that we are accountable for, that we have ourselves made, and we've sought out to bring that into the world and open ourselves up for, that pushback, that challenge, and hopefully the value to come as well. But that, I think, is inherently the biggest and most challenging part about that, is just mentally accepting the fact that you're stepping into a public arena and just wanting to kind of become vulnerable to whatever outcome may come.
That's awesome. What's the long-term goals, I guess, in your wildest dream? What do you see Orgo getting to? And how do you paint that vision?
I hope I don't regret saying this, but this is not a statement. If you never hear of Orgo as a mobile standalone consumer app again, we've succeeded, because our mission far expands beyond just this initial kind of entry point into FamTech space first, and then, kind of B2C play to follow at large. But there's a B2C to B component here that we would like to continue developing further. I see this as a SaaS play. I think about this as a utility. I dream about being an extension of something else that already exists and precedes us, that, is far greater of a potential value that we can yield. I can't tell you exactly how we will arrive there. That is the journey to come, but my gut says that that's kind of the direction that we'd love to continue pushing into and just challenging some of those norms there.
Awesome. So as we kind of start to wrap here, we understand you actually have 2 life hacks to share. Do you want to start with those?
I'd love to. Okay, so on the professional front, and for those that know me know this, and I've annoyed many when I've done it, I'm sure, but I do walk on my tread desk quite a bit. So not a life hack per se in terms of the tooling, because that's kind of what it's designed to do. But since about 2020...
Are you at tread desk right now?
I am not. I'm very stationary.
I was going to say, this is remarkable if you're walking right now. Wow.
Yeah, oh my God. I mean, who needs Orgo at that point? I'm just space, I'm floating through space at this point. No, so there is a different area with a very different background where I spend many hours walking on the tread desk, and I've been quite successful in managing through the day of, during the emails and the calls and all the things that normally happen regardless, and have clocked quite a few miles doing so. So in terms of fitness, in terms of just kind of mental health, especially at the times when it's winter, it's cold out, you're on calls all day, that's been a life hack for many, many years at this point. So I love doing that and kind of calling it out. So if you need a link, I'm not sponsored by anybody, I swear, but I do love a good tread desk setup. So that's one professionally. Personally, if you guys like to host and you make mixed drinks, whether it's margaritas or otherwise, if you put into a blender a little bit of the detergent and just some water and spin that thing, it cleans itself. And then we're off to the next batch of those margaritas. So you're welcome.
Well, I thought you were serving those. So I was like, whoa.
Wait. You put detergent in your margarita and then what? Yeah. Wait, where do you spin it?
No, so after you make a margarita, you have to wash the blender. And that becomes I don't know. It's do I really need this smoothie? I don't want to wash this thing. So you fill it up with water. You put a little bit of detergent in it. You spin it. You blend it. And it cleans itself. It's a self-cleaning mechanism.
That's a good life hack. That's a good one.
It's the summer's coming. You want to host. You want to have a couple cocktails. You want people over. So I
like that. Flavio, you don't want to
go? Yeah. So do you guys remember mint.com?
Yeah, it got closed down, right? The shut
down. Well, it's dead. It's gone. But there is an alternative that I've been playing around with that I like a lot. Well, there's 2. I used to use this thing called Personal Capital. If you've heard of it, it's actually free, and it connects all your account and it gets you a bird's eye view into everything. But it doesn't do budgeting like Mint was doing. And so now I came across this thing called Monarch app, Monarch Money is the name of it, monarchmoney.com. And it does both, right? It connects all the accounts and it does budgeting. Yeah, it looks pretty nice app. So I've been playing around with it and it looks pretty good.
All right. Mine is, I don't know how it'd be received. So I'm on these, I'm on Zoom calls all day and, I have this podcast. And so I went really overboard on lights and everything. But my hack is this: I could click one button and then it turns off all the lights in my, in the office, which I now call the studio. And and then one button that can turn them all on. And it's this app, which is super slick. So on Mac, it's called Scene Cuts, and it's an open source free macOS app that allows you to create any automations that use smart homes. So what I did is I bought a $10 Amazon, smart plug, and then I can now control the smart plug directly from macOS. And so I plugged it into I just have two little buttons in my toolbar. I can turn it on or off. And you could do this with Siri but I got sick of constantly talking to robots saying, hey, turn this on. Hey, turn that on, turn that off. Cause I do it all day because it's on and off. And so my hack, and it sounds so silly, is to just add those two buttons into the toolbar so I can turn it on with just one little click and it turns right on, turns right off. It's free, integrates with all the scene stuff. It just makes it super simple. And it can be any automation. It doesn't have to be turning on or off devices. It could launch any Mac automation. So that's awesome. My new one I'm playing with.
Scene as in music scene cuts in one word.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. It's great.
Oh, there you go.
Which, by the way, speaking to robots, I agree with you. Everybody's coming to think that we're going to be speaking without that little AI pin and all these interfaces. I don't think that's ever going to happen. It's so awkward talking to robots. But there is one use case that I've been talking a lot more, which is writing emails. The AI has been getting good enough that I can write a lot of emails now with voice, and the Mac has also a button somewhere at the top, I guess, or on the keyboard where it just starts recording, and it's pretty good.
Good to know.
Excellent. Zoya, how can people reach out to you? How can they get in touch with you? And how can people learn more about Orgo?
I appreciate that. It's orgohq.com. So super simple. Sign up for our beta. So you'll see that ready for download within days. We're just about ready to launch. So it'll be even easier for you to find us then. I am on LinkedIn, Zoya Lehrer. I've started to just open up my socials. Oh my God. Opening up Instagram, TikTok. So follow me on that new journey as I will kind of stumble through and start become a little bit more B2C, oriented and focused. So all the channels.
Well, thanks so much for coming on, and have a great rest of the day.
Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, guys.
The water's fine, homie, jump into the deep end. Sow it, you will reap it. We're talking how to start it, how to grow it, how to keep it. Take a deep breath. You are now rocking with Founder Secrets.